song. Got your old job back. There you go. All right. Want to ask, good morning, Sister Taste. I want to ask Brother Taste to give a closing prayer. So prepare for that. All right, so this morning, I went, my sermon was inspired by the many hours that I spent at the Monmouth County DMV on Wednesday. I had to get a new registration, and my car had only been recently unregistered since January. I didn't find that out until I was pulled over leaving church one night last Monday, I think. And the officer was nice enough to tell me, did I know my registration was expired? So I had no idea it was expired. I said, did it just expire? He said, yes, it just expired in January. So he was kind enough to let me go. And so I went to the Monmouth County DMV. Now, being that you recognize it's a bad time for that kind of stuff, it's everybody, it's not like the old way. I mean, it was bad enough as it was, but COVID is worse. So I get up at 4:30 in the morning, and because I got to drive an hour, and I pick down there because I'm like, if you do anything going towards South Jersey, like you go to a post office or anything like that, they have like 8 people working and 3 people in line. If you go anywhere up in North Jersey, they got 16 people in line, 1 person working. And they texted on their phone and stuff. So I went down to Monmouth County. So I thought, I knew I could have done it earlier, but I thought, well, I'll get up at 4:30, I get there by 5:30, 6, But when I got there a little around 6:30. And so the Monmouth County DMV is in a shopping strip mall. It's almost in the corner over here. So the line was all the way back to the end of the building, all the way around on the side, all the way down halfway in the back. That's where I was, the third side. And people had their, chairs that they use for fireworks. People had, bags that they were bringing for lunch. Or they had extra battery chargers. These people were equipped. They were ready. And I felt like a fish out of water because I just had a phone. And I didn't have a jacket. And the wind was blowing. I was way out of place. But I say this because I'm in line and I'm listening to now I'm old, but the 2 older people in front of me, and they're talking and they're complaining and they're talking about how people have spent the night in the parking lot so that they could get in early. This is DMV people, not the Beyonce concert. Right? It's not some, the Earth, Wind, and Fire going away concert. This is DMV. So I then start to say to myself, these people are prepared for DMV. They planned for DMV. And they've been here all night just to turn in their license or just to get their car renewed in registration, because that's where I wasn't at the one you get your driver's license. And I started wondering how many of these people had planned this way for Christ, right? How many of these people had prepared their lives for salvation? Did they get up early and go to church? Did they get up early and read scripture? Do they have a certain place they sit in the pew, or do they have a chair at home that's designated for their Wednesday, Thursday, or Sunday night worship? And I started wondering all the things that we do when we want to do something. All the things that we do when we want to do something. And I've said it before, our choices illustrate our priorities. Our choices illustrate our priorities. So if I'm going to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get my car renewed an hour away, then that was a priority. And so I watched other people have this priority. Some even more prioritized it more than myself. I couldn't imagine what the person in the front of the line had done to be the person in the front of the line. So it made me wonder, how would I be the person in the front of the line on the day the book was over, right? What would I have to do to be that person? So I just started to write the sermon. So I started to say, okay, what have people done to get to Christ, right? You know, like I know you must think I really like Beyonce because I mention her all the time. So yes, I like Beyonce. All right, snap. But I've never stood in line to buy a ticket. And the best way to get me not to have gone to her last concert was somebody said, man, that's $200. I said, I'm gonna have to download her, right? So because why? Because it wasn't a priority. It was a choice I would like to have made, but up to $200, right? So I started to wonder, what do people do? And we live downtown. We live literally across the street from, the opening, like a block from Prudential Center. So we can see all the stuff that I'm talking about. None of the stuff that's made up. We've seen people with tents outside for days. They would have the stuff for We Got Talent and that other thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of those shows, American Idol, and they would be out there for days waiting. They would have these concerts, I think these from Hong Kong or whatever, mm-hmm. and they'd be there for 3 days with tents waiting to buy these tickets. And so I started thinking, what would people do to get to Jesus? All right, so I started looking in the Bible. I started wondering, what have some people done to get to Jesus? So we got some people who came to him pleading, right? We know that that's the centurion in Matthew chapter 8, verse 5-13. We know that he had a servant that was sick. He saw Jesus. He goes up to Jesus and he pleads with Jesus to cure his servant. Now, I know it's interesting because servant is really another word for slave, but you have to understand the Roman slavery was some similarity to slavery in the United States, but very small. Like they gave up rights to their wife, they gave up rights to their children, some movement of themselves, but they could buy themselves in and they could ask to be in slavery and buy themselves out. You know, it was a little bit more, you know, I don't know any black person that was saying, I sure want to get into some slavery, right? But in Rome, some people could be so poor that slavery looked better. So they would hire themselves out to work either in the field or in the house of a Roman leader. So, and it tended to sometimes be very close relationships between servants and those that were the heads of the house. So this sounds weird, you didn't know it, but in actuality, this is very common. And so he's coming out, he's pleading with Jesus to cure his servant. And so Jesus is going to come to the house. He says, no, don't come to my house. He doesn't even feel that he's worthy enough to have the Lord in his home. It's amazing. But he still went to the Lord because he had to go to the Lord. Only the Lord could give him to bless him in the way in which he wanted. So he said, if you would just speak it. And so the Lord said, your faith, was cured him. So he speaks it and they go home and the servant is cured. And then we have people who fought through crowds to get to Jesus. The one that we know the most about is the bleeding woman in Luke chapter 8, 43 through 48, and Matthew 9, 20 through 22. And it's this woman, she had this condition, and she'd been bleeding for well over 12 years, and she spent all her money on doctors, and no one could cure her. But yet she heard Jesus was coming, and here's a woman who was ostracized in the community. She didn't have friends anymore, you know. Nobody wanted to be around her. And it had to be a very lonely thing for her. But then she heard Jesus was coming, and she got energetic. She heard Jesus was coming, and she didn't send somebody for Jesus. She, like the centurion, went to go to Jesus. She had to fight the crowd, and she's weak. She's weak. You can only imagine. She has this condition that's caused her to bleed for this over a decade, and yet consistently bleeding over a decade, and yet she had the strength to not just know Jesus was coming, not to get up to go to Jesus, but to fight through the crowd around and say to herself, if I could just touch the hem of his garment. She did. Jesus turned, and he felt the power come out of it, and he looks back, and he knows it's the woman. He tells her that she's cute. We know that there are people that have come today yell for Jesus. I like blind Bartimaeus. I like Bartimaeus' story because Bartimaeus had yelled out for people all the time, right? And nobody cared. In Mark chapter 10, verse 46 to 52, Bartimaeus is a guy that's always right there. You know, you see him, you might go to ShopRite or whatever these stores, it's the same guy always asking for a dollar, right? Same guy. And I like the guy with the trash can, with the gas can, right? And I'm thinking to myself, your car still ain't started. You know, but it's the same guy. So blind Bartimaeus is out there, he's yelling at the same people all the time. Hey, Carl, Steve, Graham, Ted, nobody cares. But when he screams for Jesus, they tell him to be quiet. It's interesting. He starts yelling for the Lord, and they tell him to be quiet. We need to always pay attention to people that want you to stop yelling for the Lord. And when they do, get rid of those people right away. If you're going to yell for anybody, yell for the person that can truly do something for you. And so Bartimaeus yells to get his attention, and he gets his attention. And because he gets his attention, Jesus does what for blind Bartimaeus? Blind Bartimaeus can now do what? He can now see. So many of us are blind, even though we have sight. We have no vision, but we have sight. We are blind. We are like Bartimaeus. We should be yelling out for Jesus. Then there are those we learned last week that come to Jesus, that they come into someone else's house, right? Pharisee, Luke 7, 36 through 50, found a sinner woman who came. Comes into the Pharisee house. She knows Jesus is going to be there. She crashes the party. Doesn't pay attention to anyone else at the party. No one else. Doesn't give a what's up to the host. She comes for what's one reason and one reason only, Jesus. She comes up from behind. She comes through the throne of grace. And what's interesting about the way she treats him, about the way she puts oil on him, and the way she kisses his feet, and the way she does all those things, is she treats that as the throne of grace, right? I said that last week, that he's sitting down, it's like the throne of grace. It's like when Moses first came to the tree, the burning bush, and the Lord tells him to take off his shoes. He tells him to take off his shoes because he's on holy ground, which tells you that wherever the Lord is, holy ground. So she's sitting there. The Lord is sitting there where? Holy ground. Because he's there. And she comes to the throne of grace, and she's kissing on his feet. She's putting oil on it. She's wiping her tears off with her hair. So there are many ways in the Bible people have come to Jesus. But I found the ones that just showed up. These are the kind of friends you want. This is the kind of Christians we need to be. When there's no door, when there's no window, when there's no room, just have a microphone. In Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, we get these 5 guys that hear Jesus is coming. They get ready. Jesus is coming. And our boy got to be cured. I heard this Jesus got cures people. We're going to get there. And they, like I went to the DMV, got there late, right?